my podcast. I'm Vianne, your host, and each episode will explore expert insights and inspiring stories to help you take control of your financial literacy. So let's dive right in with our first guest, Mr. Neerukonda. Welcome. Um, so let's get started. You started your career in consulting and then moved to investment banking. What do you think drove that transition, and how do you think consulting prepared you for the world of finance?
When I graduated, so I graduated from Washington University in St. Louis in 2001, so it's a long time ago. There weren't that many companies that were recruiting,
Mhm.
so a lot of us just kind of, you know, felt like lemmings and just went in one direction or another.
Mhm.
And so investment banking was never really in my thought process. And so I got a job with Accenture here in Chicago. And so I went to Accenture. I knew generally what consulting was, but I think what consulting helped me start with was they kind of put you in front of clients. And it's a little weird because you're 21, 22 years old, not an expert in anything, but all of a sudden people have hired you now to become an expert and you're giving other people advice. So it's a little bit, sometimes consultants are sort of put in the background and clients aren't really seeing you. I almost immediately after training got put on a project with Blue Cross Blue Shield, and was put in front of clients. And so I think that client facing experience was really helpful because then when I got to investment banking, at least in the corporate finance department, you're not really interacting with clients all that much.
Mhm.
You're just kind of, running numbers and stuff. But you have to work with senior partners. And so you get that. I got sort of comfortable being in front of professionals who were in their 30s and 40s and 50s.
Mhm.
So for me, that was the biggest help coming by consulting was getting that client facing experience.
That's amazing. I know a lot of people struggle with being put on the spot with a new job in a new field like that. So I'm interested in how that really helped you with future work.
Yeah.
I understand that both of your parents are in the medical field. Do you think there was any pressure to follow them, or was finance always your primary interest?
Finance was always my primary interest. Yeah, almost everybody in my family are physicians except for me, and even in my wife's family, most of her side is are physicians as well. I don't think there was definitely not pressure on me. I applied to WashU because it had an undergraduate business program.
Mm-hmm.
Chicago, University of Chicago, and Northwestern didn't have undergraduate business programs, so I knew that I wanted to study business. I didn't necessarily know particularly in finance, but kind of grew up liking stocks, and my dad would always watch this show on Friday nights about stocks, and so yeah, I definitely knew that I wanted to do something business related. I never tried pre-med. I stayed in the business program the whole time.
Yeah, and
So no, I didn't get that parental pressure.
yeah. Um, so you traded stocks as a college student, and I'm sure it must have
Yeah.
been a learning curve. What do you think were some of your early wins and losses, and what do you think they taught you about the market?
Yeah, that's a good question. I so I'm sure most of the people listening to this are probably too young to remember kind of the dot-com crash. But for those that don't know, anything that ended in dot-com was, going up 4% a day, and it felt pretty easy to make money in the stock market.
Mm-hmm.
So that was before the year 2000, and also there was a lot of spending going on for computers because all computers were programmed to sort of start with 1.9 in their computer, and there was all this money spent on reprogramming these computers to come over for this Y2K change that was going to happen. So there was all this euphoria. It was easy as like a college, freshman or sophomore to sort of ride that euphoria. And I graduated sort of at not a great time because it was 2001.
Mm-hmm.
Market had crashed post 2000 and sort of this tech bubble burst. But I think actually having those types of mistakes and having the market fall early in your career,
Mm-hmm.
it's actually a really good thing to have happen because it makes you realize that it's not as easy as you.
Yeah.
There's a Warren Buffett quote that I'm going to butcher the quote, but it's sort of like who's not wearing swimming trunk when the tide goes out.
Mm.
Right? When the tide's in, everybody looks like they're swimming. And that's kind of true about the stock market as well. It's very easy to be lucky, right? If the stock market goes up 52% of days or whatever the number is, you can guess and be right a lot of times, but you're going to get humbled eventually. And so I think I wasn't, I'm trading like $100 or $200 worth of stocks in college. So it wasn't like, even if I made a huge error,
Yes.
it wasn't going to do anything dramatic. But, I dabbled in options, got burned because I didn't really understand what I was doing. But, those are good lessons to make when college don't.
Yeah, wow. I love that quote. That's really amazing. And I think it's so applicable too. It seemed like I just love how you can apply so much life to finance, if that makes sense. Um, what led you to pursue an MBA at Chicago Booth?
Yeah. So traditionally, I worked in consulting and then I sort of did, I'm going to take you a step back, but answer your question.
Okay.
So a lot of kids came straight out of college and went straight to investment banking. I didn't do that. I went to consulting and I sort of almost restarted my post college career by joining an analyst class at an investment bank. The kids that I was working with, kids, but the college graduates that I was working with were people who had just also finished college. I sort of had 2 years more of like work experience. That was my leg in to getting into the investment bank. So that was like my pitch basically was, hey, you could hire me who's been in front of a client for 2 years, or you can hire this fresh college graduate and we're both equally smart. Why wouldn't you take the kid with some experience? That's how I kind of got into the investment banking job. But the traditional path after investment banking could, at some investment banks, continue and become an associate. But sort of the next progression, at least back then and maybe now, has been to try to get into private equity or venture capital or things like that. So I went to a private equity firm based in Chicago right after my investment banking job in Chicago. And that was another kind of 2-year program. Investment banking tends to be 2-3 years, and then private equity pre-business school tends to go 2-3 years. And so it was a natural progression for me to want to apply to business schools. And I only applied to University of Chicago and Northwestern because my family's from Chicago. I wanted to stay in Chicago. I was recently engaged. And so my wife got a job in Chicago. So I also think I gravitated well to the kind of University of Chicago teachings that kind of believe in the efficient market hypothesis and at least the underlying fundamentals about it. And I was familiar with the campus because I went to high school around there. And so for a lot of reasons, it's obviously a highly reputable school. They have an unbelievable finance program, an unbelievable analytical finance program. So that's why I wanted to go there.
That's great. So private equity seems to be a significant part of your career. What do you think were some of your key takeaways, and how do you think those influence your decisions today?
Yeah, I really like private equity for a reason I think that a lot of people don't really appreciate. When you're working in private equity and you're deploying other people's capital, you're buying businesses, right? There's different stages of private equity. There's growth equity, there's buyout capital. The funds that I had worked with were a little bit on the smaller side relative to speaking in private equity. And we would look at a lot of businesses, right? So we're trying to find businesses on our own, but we're also finding businesses through, an investment banking sale process where there's a lot of people looking at the business. And so investment bankers are writing these 50-page books about the company, and you're getting maybe 200 of them a year, and you've got to sift through. Out of the 200 or 300 that your firm may look through, you may only buy 3 or 4 of them in a year, right? So for lack of a better phrase, you're kind of kissing a lot of frogs. But for people who are really interested in just learning about businesses, you get to see a ton of different businesses. There's so many businesses that I didn't even appreciate exist. So I saw, one business that trained bomb sniffing dogs and drug sniffing dogs. The whole business, that made multiple millions of dollars a year doing that. And so the thing that I liked best about private equity was being able to see all these different types of businesses and understanding what are the value drivers in business. I think that has helped me as I've kind of pivoted my career to financial planning and investment advisory work. I do some sort of bottoms up approach to valuing businesses. A lot of what I do is understanding positioning, right? And so whether it's positioning of people's portfolio companies or positioning in terms of understanding how a company is positioned in a given industry, I think that helps kind of my insights into the businesses that I may be recommending, or the sectors I may be recommending, or the asset allocation might be recommended.
Absolutely. Let's talk a bit more about that transition from private equity to founding PVA Financial.
Sure.
Were there any challenges? What inspired you?
Yeah. So I was always, as I mentioned earlier, my family has a lot of physicians in it,
Mhm.
as well as my extended family. There's not too many, if any, people who were in finance. So from my family's perspective, I was always kind of like the kid who was interested in money or the kid who was interested in finances. So I've always kind of helped, whether it was my parents or other people, just talk about money, understand basic personal finance type things. I've always just been interested in that type of stuff. So I never practiced it as a career. I left private equity in 2015 for about 5 years to kind of help um, uh, almost a family foundation that we had, and I was traveling internationally. And so when I was stateside, I was looking because when I was traveling internationally, the time zone difference, it was almost 11 hours. And so that's how I kind of got into this is I was softly helping people who may have just had basic finance, personal finance type questions. And then I sort of morphed that into, hey, maybe I could get my Series 65. Maybe I could complete the requirements for the certified financial planner designation. And that's kind of what I started to do. And then when COVID hit, I sort of pressed the gas a little bit on that stuff. I was at home anyway, so that's how I got through all those certifications.
Wow. I just want to ask a question about something that you said. You were always interested in it and you were always helping your family. How important do you think it is for people around my age or college students to have an interest in finance when they're exploring a career in it? Because I know a lot of people they kind of have the goal of they just see the money that comes from it, but how much do you think it's important to be like passionate about what you're doing?
Yeah, passion can be a strong term.
Yeah.
You certainly have to have an interest, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think it's myopic to make decisions solely based on money. Obviously, that can be a good motivating factor, right? If you've got a lot of student loans, or if you just want to, if your ultimate goal is to make a lot of money, it's a lot easier to excel at something if you're interested. So if you don't like numbers, but you want to make a lot of money, like investment banking probably isn't going to be great for you. Yeah, you could probably get through it, but what's the next stepping stone that's going to help you? And so I know it's difficult for, college aged kids to know to chart out their whole future. But, I do think that it's important to find something that you're interested in. And that doesn't mean that you're going to know exactly what you're interested in when you're a senior in college. When you're in grade, you're going to give yourself some time to kind of navigate the career waters and see where things take you. But when you do find something that you have even a mild interest in, you're naturally going to want to work harder at that. So even if somebody has an interest towards science, you can still be an investment banker. You can still be a consultant. You don't necessarily have to go into a field that's directly related to that, right? But you could be in a health group of an investment bank, or you could go to a private equity firm that focuses solely on healthcare investments. So you can scratch that itch sometimes based on what you're interested in.
Absolutely.
I think that makes you more passionate about things.
And with a background in psychology, how do you think behavioral finance plays a role in investment strategies and especially when you advise your clients?
Yeah. Saying I have a background in psychology might be a little bit of a stretch. I minored in it in college, but the University of Chicago has a pretty well-known professor named Richard Thaler, who published a book which I highly recommend everybody read called Nudge. And there's a lot of interesting aspects of behavioral economics that I think actually apply in the real world, right? So there was always this tension of, is behavioral economics kind of a leading factor, or is the efficient market hypothesis a leading factor? And people always positioned it that it has to be one or the other. But I don't actually think that's true. Just from my observation, it feels like both can easily apply in the real world. And I see that, right? When the U.S. government tries to make a more proactive effort to get people to save for retirement, it's it is a better thing if you default people into for their 401k. And if they don't want to, they have to opt out, right? That makes a big difference when you do things that are opt in automatically and you have to opt out, as opposed to the default is people not enrolled and they have to proactively enroll. You see very different enrollment, right? It's the fundamental reason why taxes are taken out of our paycheck, because it's very difficult to get people to write a big check at the end of the year if you're not taking out. So there's all those sort of like small things that you can do that can help people over the long run. And so I definitely think there are pieces of behavioral economics where if you understand kind of sunk cost fallacy, right? I don't know if you know what that is, but if I've already bought concert tickets, the fact that I paid $200 for them shouldn't factor into my decision. You know, if it's a snowy night and I'm deciding whether to go or not. The same thing applies to a stock, right? People tend to hold on to their losers because they think they're more attached to them, hoping that they're going to come back. Understanding that bias has helped me a ton. So, you know, I have a pretty formulaic response to shedding losers. Once they're down a certain percentage, if they're in a certain sector, no matter how much I love that stock, I'll dump it. And so I think that has influenced how I give advice.
Yeah.
And, you know, even getting people to save, right? A lot of my clients may make a pretty good living, but they they only be saving, you know, at the end. They don't think about paying themselves first. So I might put them on a path to say, okay, you might not think that you can save, but let's just start saving $50 a week. Let's put that into a brokerage account, right? And then slowly I might nudge them to say, okay, let's increase that to 75. You think you can do that? All of a sudden, you know, 4 years later, we're saving $500 a week and they're able to adjust to it. It's all behavioral economics, right? That's nothing more than conditioning.
Yeah. I understand that you travel. And do you think your international travels seem to have influenced your shift to financial advisory? I mean, like that global exposure, did it shape any investment philosophy and your approach?
Yeah. So I don't travel internationally all that much anymore, just with my family. But I will I would say the impact that it's had is just an appreciation that there are very big and very influential companies outside of the US.
Yes.
The US stock market dominates in the world total market cap. It is a much larger percentage than any other economy in the world.
Absolutely.
With that said, you know, diversification is an important thing to have in most people's portfolios. So I think just having traveled internationally and, you know, just visiting other countries, you sort of get an appreciation that, you know, all of investing doesn't have to be US centric. And so I don't know if it's a direct correlation to how my investing philosophy has changed, but almost every one of my clients, you know, may have been lighter, may have had a lower percentage of their investment portfolio in international than what a traditional benchmark would be. Just because, you know, naturally we sort of invest in what we know, we invest where we are. And that's true everywhere, right?
Yes.
Japanese investors own more Japanese stocks than they do US stocks. So I feel like my travels have at least helped me shed more visibility into learning about other, you know, economies, both emerging market economies as well as developed market economies that I might not have otherwise paid as much attention to. You can find great companies. I'm not, you know, individually stock picking companies from Korea or America or other places, but, you know, even those sectors or those geographies, you know, you can find exchange traded funds that are Latin America related or emerging markets related or developed markets. And so I think that's probably how I've been influenced most by traveling, is just getting an appreciation for those sectors.
Yeah. So you're a certified financial planner. What made you want to pursue this certification specifically?
Yeah, so having gone to an undergraduate business program as well as getting my MBA, taken a lot of the core classes that are required. I had obviously a pretty strong educational background in finance and portfolio theory and accounting, certainly. And so those aspects of the CFP curriculum as well as the exam, I probably felt pretty comfortable with even beforehand, just given my academic background. The areas, even before I decided that I wanted to start, my own registered investment advisory firm, in my mind, it was like, okay, I could take it. It's COVID now. I've got nothing else to do really. And I can take this online curriculum and fill in the gaps of things, even for my own personal financial situation or my family's financial situation, and plug some holes in. I had no background really in insurance. Like, they don't teach you about insurance in business school.
Mm-hmm.
They don't teach you about basic estate planning in business school, right? You learn some about taxes and corporate taxes, but I wasn't fully knowledgeable in. I'm obviously not a tax accountant, right? I can't prepare people's taxes, but I can be knowledgeable in ways to invest more tax efficiently. So there are all these subject areas that I realized that even if I don't even, take the test, just taking the coursework will just make me a smarter personal finance person, even if it was just for me managing my own portfolio.
Yeah.
Worth the couple $1,000s that the course cost.
Mm-hmm.
That was my main reason for wanting to do it. I think it lends some credibility, as I think it should, because it sort of conveys to a client that, hey, there's at least a baseline level of knowledge here. Mm-hmm. Anybody can call themselves, sadly, a financial planner. There's no real license. There's licensing required to manage assets, but there's not licensing that's required to kind of dispense financial, information or advice per se. So I think it lends some credibility to clients, but no client is coming to me or not coming to me because I'm a CFP professional. Mm-hmm. I think it helps in that they know I have a baseline level of knowledge in, these 5 or 6 areas.
Absolutely.
And that's probably the biggest benefit, is it has provided me a more well-rounded knowledge base with which I can help my clients with.
Yes. So you've worked in private equity, consulting, investment banking, and financial planning. How do you think each role shapes your understanding, and how do you think they work together to help your knowledge of finance in general?
Yeah, everybody has a unique career path, and you take kind of nuggets of information or skills that you develop in each job and apply it to the next job. I think my path is just like anybody else's path, where I took sort of the client-facing experience that I gained from consulting, and at least I think I was able to apply that to investment banking in a probably more atypical way, because when we got a sell-side engagement, right, when we were hired to sell a company, I felt comfortable, talking with the CEO who we're representing. We may be selling his business for $150 million, and I'm this lowly 22-year-old recent or 24-year-old recent college kid who's working 90 hours a week. But because I had that consulting background, I felt comfortable being able to talk to them. So that was one transferable skill set. That didn't necessarily help in financial services per se. Mm-hmm. Certainly the investment banking background, being able to build models, being able to understand financial statements, it would be very challenging to get into private equity if you understand that. So that kind of built itself. In private equity, right, as I talked about before, analyzing businesses, understanding the drivers of businesses, that doesn't change whether they're public companies or private companies. Being able to understand your investor base, being able to, understand the types of returns that they're looking for, understand what those risk-adjusted returns look like, understanding fees, how they can impact returns is a big, right? So fees in private equity, if you're not a well-performing private equity fund, it may be difficult to beat your public market equivalent. So having that appreciation, I think, has definitely helped me in financial planning. Now, I'm very, fee sensitive for the investments that I might recommend to my clients, because I've done the math, right? I can see how that impacts returns over extended periods of time. And, it's sort of like steering a yacht, right? If you can make a very small correction, but after you've traveled 500 or 1,000 miles, right, you're now very far away than if you didn't make that half a degree. Mm-hmm. So I feel like all those kind of insights from the prior jobs all just kind of influenced view the world and how you can help people going forward.
Yeah. And what about the leadership that you had in all your other jobs? How do you think that has changed the way that you lead at your own company?
Yeah, so I'm still a company of one, but I will grow. I've actually intentionally, I think, not hired because I feel like I can handle more clients, and I've only started a
Hmm.
couple months ago, but I built up a good book of business. My first, it's unusual, as I mentioned in consulting, you sort of get hired and then you're thrown in front of clients as
Yeah.
this, and you're not really an expert. You're just somebody who's being taught how to more efficiently maybe do things than the client might do. Um, in investment banking and in private equity, I was in sort of the entry level position. Once I finished business school and then I went to a different private equity firm, I had some analysts that would support the work that I was doing. And that was almost the first real time where I had people who could assist me with doing either financial analysis or, whatever kind of work we needed done at the
Uh-huh.
firm. Um, but having been on the investor side and actually either being on the boards of companies or trying to help our portfolio companies grow, even though we're not day-to-day management, we're trying to give advice. So
Hmm.
that sort of advice giving role is fairly similar to what it's like in the financial planning world, because I'm giving advice to clients. You're realizing what information is out there, what the current situation is. You're trying to figure out where the company or where the client is trying to get to, and you're trying to give advice to get them to go from where they are today to where they want to go tomorrow.
Hmm.
That's pretty similar, right? That's Yes, you're doing very different things in trying to do that and trying to get that accomplished, but when you boil it down, that's really the type of advice you're trying to
Yeah.
get. Hopefully
Um,
that answers.
that did. So you've worked obviously in various fields of finance. How do you approach a work-life balance?
So it's easier now since I work from home.
Yes.
I've asked a lot of my clients whether they want, to meet in an office, and none of them do. I meet on Zoom. I meet, at their house at night. It's easy to do. My kids are a little bit older, so it was a little bit harder for younger. I just come home late. I, missed some things when they were younger. Um, it's a little bit better now, though my kids are 15, almost 13, and 11. So, they are kind of doing their own thing. So when we try to take vacations or we try to go places, I try to not be on my phone a ton. I have clients, so I have to be responsive to clients, but I'm not, cracking open my computer when we're on a tour bus. Like I'm able to get away, from that perspective. Um, but I think you just have to do it conscientiously. I think I can pretty much dictate my own schedule now, so it's easy for me, right? Um, I had a client meeting last night, and so I was able to schedule some things around that, right? And so when I'm booking those meetings, I can, go to my son's cross country race and then schedule a meeting right after, right? I just had my kids' curriculum night tonight, and then I scheduled this, our conversation right after. So I think you just have to do it conscientiously and
Hmm.
not always put. It's not about not putting work first. It's understanding, when you boil it down, what are the important things. But when you're working for someone else, that's challenging to do
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you mentioned that young professionals should let money drive them early on. Looking back, how did you balance interest and financial stability when building your career?
That's a good question. I really just didn't know any better, so I wouldn't say that I went into investment banking just because I knew it was going to pay a lot of money. I knew that it would be a good kind of stepping stone, where you learn a lot in 2 years and you're working really hard. And the thing that I realized is you're willing to work hard when you respect the people you're working for.
Hmm.
Respect the people that you're working for because either they've done something to lose your respect. It becomes very challenging to want to work hard for them. And there were some people who fit category A, there were some people who fit category B. So, you know, yeah, I don't know. That's a hard question. I got to think about that.
Okay.
Back to me on that one.
Okay. Let's talk a bit about the finance industry in general. What do you see as the future of the financial advisor industry, especially with this rise of robo advisors and technological disruptions like ChatGPT or just AI in general in finance?
Yeah, I don't think the field is going to go away. I mean, robo advisors were, kind of threatened the financial planning industry years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and if you look at them now, they're not as prevalent as people thought they were going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because people fundamentally, want um, comfort. And part of that comfort they get in conversations with people who they know are looking out for them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking for something that's just a formulaic way to invest, yes, you can. A robo advisor will do that for you. There's more aspects to financial planning than just how you're making investments, right? You can still own a bunch of index funds, and you can, follow all the academic research and maybe passively own very low cost index funds. You will, if you got a 30-year time horizon, you're going to do great. If you can just, best thing you can do is blink and open your account 30 years later, and you'll be great. That's that's only one small piece of what financial planners do. That piece can be replicated by a robo advisor.
Mm-hmm.
But what can't be replicated from a robo advisor are the intangibles of, being able to understand, what is making the client tick, understand, what may be driving their behavioral decisions to
Mm-hmm.
maybe spend more than they're earning, and being able to nudge them to, okay, let's move you to a debit card on this certain account for your shopping expenses because you may be overspending, relative to your financial plan. That is very difficult for ChatGPT or AI or, a robo advisor to manage. The other piece that I would say is a robo advisor only knows what Peloton do, right? So you may give a portion of your capital, they manage it this way. Well, that robo advisor has no idea how your 401k is invested. It has no idea, if family is giving you a gift. It has no idea whether you have student loans or not. It has no real idea. You can change the risk parameters of it over time, but there's a lot of moving parts to it. The robo advisor is just, coming up with an asset allocation based on maybe asking you some questions.
Mm-hmm.
It's just rebalancing that. So I don't think it's ever going to move financial planners from the industry. I think it's just going to help both kind of AI and robo advisors, I think, are going to be tools that financial planners can use to better assist their clients. It certainly has made me a little bit more productive, and I'm probably not even using it, not the robo advisor part, but the just kind of ChatGPT and, those sort of early stage AI tools.
Mm-hmm.
I can, generate emails faster. I can create content a little bit faster. And so that allows me to just be at least that much more efficient than maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. In your view, how do you think the finance industry has changed since your early days at William Blair and Company?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been a long time since I've been an investment banker, so I wouldn't be able to speak on exactly how that aspect of finance has changed. I mean, I know, they're not getting crushed, I don't think, 100 hours a week and, sleeping on the floor and all that sort of stuff like we probably used to do. I think, especially in private equity, at least, a lot of the way returns were previously generated were by financial engineering.
Mm-hmm.
That has become kind of commoditized, right? Everyone understands the concept of, we do it with when you buy a house, right? You put down a little bit of equity, you borrow a ton of money, and if it goes up, you get a lot of that appreciation. That back. Sort of secret sauce on how to generate returns on your equity is not a differentiator anymore, right? Everyone can do that. Everyone has access to capital. Everyone can find, the cheapest financing around for the most part. So what I think has changed in finance is you've got to be able to go kind of second level. You can't just generate returns because you have access to capital. So I think understanding the fundamentals of business and being able to kind of really take a deep dive into whether it's a business or whether it's a public company or whatever you're researching. I don't know if that's changed, but it's required more discipline, I guess, in investing because there's so much capital chasing so few deals that you've got to be even more. You have to scrutinize things even more now than you probably did previously.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I think that may be one way in which finance has changed. Personal finance has changed. I mean, similar to probably the healthcare industry, right? People have endless amounts of information at their fingertips now compared to 20 years ago, right? So the ability you have to add value in different ways other than just have access to this mutual fund, right? That used to be the way an investment manager, you could have a whole book of business on just giving clients access to investment. Mm-hmm. There's not really that sort of wall there anymore, right? Information has been kind of democratized. So I think it's forced people to find other ways to add value, which is better in the long run for clients.
Mm-hmm. So one final question.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to young professionals entering what has become such a competitive field today?
The advice I would give is don't focus on tomorrow, focus on where you see tomorrow leading to. So I know everybody, because I was the same way, right? It felt like the end of the world when I got a rejection letter from a company, and I got rejected from companies that I didn't even apply to. Well, and that's, the case with a lot of people. But I think the biggest advice is just try not to have a very short-term outlook. Mm-hmm. Try to map out as best you can what you want the arc of your career to look like. And mine definitely does not look, the path that I took is not the path that I mapped out.
Yeah.
It's okay, right? Everybody's going to take their own path. But I think now you can be successful learning things on your own, right? There's so much information at your fingertips that there's a lot of things you can teach yourself how to do. So my advice would be find the things that you're interested in and try to pursue those. Not just, like rah, follow your passion kind of stuff. I understand you got to pay the bills and people want to, maybe pursue jobs that are going to be stepping stones for other things. But you want to take those steps conscientiously. You want to know, okay, these are the skills that I think I'm going to get in this job. That might open up these 5 doors. And if that's where I want to go, then this is a good step to take. Mm-hmm. Versus, I just want to go to the highest paying thing. Yeah, that might have some other things that it leads to, but it may not be in the geography I want to be. It might not open doors that seem the most interesting to me. So don't necessarily just go for the highest step. Plenty of people do it. Plenty of people successful doing it. Plenty of people, all they care about is just making a ton of money. But I think if you pursue things that you're a little bit more interested in, you can have vision to look kind of 5-10 years down the road and map out where you want to be 10 years from now, work backwards on what's the best way to get there. I think it tends to lead to better outcome.
Mm-hmm. Just a small follow-up to that one.
Yeah.
The way you said everyone has access to so much information now, and obviously this is amazing. Everyone can teach themselves new skills and gain such a wider variety of different aspects of knowledge. How do you think that someone can differentiate themselves from a crowd when everyone has access to so much?
Yeah, it's really hard. Mm-hmm. And I know that's not like a comforting answer. Yeah. There's going to be a whole group of people who have already, their parents have some pre-established connections, or, their neighbor knows a guy who knows a guy. But the more you network, right, the more at-bats you try to give yourself, more likely you are to hit a home run, right? Mm-hmm. It's going to be very difficult to land the types of things you want sitting behind a computer. And, I know that's a very, old man sort of thing to say, but the more you can put yourself in front of other people and, let them see you, talk to them, tell them that, these are the skills that I have. Just ask to buy them a cup of coffee and pick their brain. To me, those were the things that yielded the best result, because I didn't go in there like with my resume in hand, right? Everybody knows maybe why you're asking somebody out to lunch, but if you show up with a resume, you're going to put somebody off, right?
Yeah.
But if you find somebody who's in an industry that you're interested in and you just say, you're really busy, I was wondering if I could buy you a cup of coffee and just pick your brain for 20 minutes just to get some advice. Yeah. If you do that, and don't show up in a suit with your resume, that person is probably going to look at you a little more favorably, and the wheels might turn in their head, right? If you're able to impress them in 20 minutes, just from a normal person, right? And conveying some knowledge that you're smart and, you're willing to work hard and all these other things, they might not have a job, but they might know somebody 3 steps removed who is looking for a really smart intern, And to me, that's a better way of doing it and a better way of standing out from the crowd. If you just send, I don't know, this is just my own theory. If you just send out like 50 cover letters and 50 resumes, you're just a stack on a piece of paper, right? Like I used to, even at small firms, we would get a book of 100 resumes for one associate spot. Like, I can tell you from somebody who's flipped through these books of resumes, after you get through like 12, everybody just looks the same.
Yeah.
Like maybe somebody's got a 3.8 and somebody else has a 3.7, or maybe somebody's done something interesting or is like in the military or in a sport or maybe something like that. But it's pretty hard to differentiate yourself on a piece of paper. It's a lot easier to differentiate yourself when you're face to face. Where you can get face to face with people in industries that you're interested in, I think the better. So it's a long-winded answer, but that'd be my advice, is just try to find ways to have coffee and lunch with people. Just generally like to hear themselves talk. And so if you're willing to buy them a cup of coffee, they don't need you to buy them the cup of coffee, but they're usually are willing to find maybe 15 or 20 minutes to just have a conversation and you pick their brain about their career path.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can leave a positive impression on people that way. And then you never know when they might be able to help you in the future. So the more you can build up that base of people who you've met and whose business card you have, I think it take dividends over time.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mr. Neerukonda, for all the information and the advice. So thank you. That was so great. Thanks for listening and on the MyFly podcast. We hope you found today's episode insightful. For more information, you can find us at MyFly Global on all platforms. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Have a good night.